towards the NFL because I have been literally dying to find content about what is going on with the Indianapolis Colts. And we just so happen to have found one really, really good content creator and really good stuff with covering the Indianapolis Colts. Joining me, Landon Oliver via the Global Satellite Network, presented by StreamYard. So, Landon, this year was strange in my opinion with the Colts because looking at it, like I love Frank Reich. I love the fact that as a quarterback whisperer and a head coach, the development there really was like promising for what the Colts have been, but then they just kind of took this weird turn. Now you've got Shane Steichen in the building. How is it that, like, how do you think the Colts really have to play this thing? Because I've said this. I said somebody's got to keep Jim Irsay in check because if he's in his bad moods, he didn't care what happens all around him. But as long as somebody keeps him in his good faiths, the team may be in good hands. And we know Chris Ballard's kind of, on tippy toes with how he's got to manage this. So how do you think, like, just evaluating from last season it gave us to where we stand this year?
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. And to get into last year, there were a lot of factors that played into the downfall, of where they were going into last year and where they ended up last year. Namely among those, the offense, one of the worst offenses in the National Football League. Mm-hmm. The deterioration of the offensive line, them letting Mark Lewinsky go in free agency, having no answer at left tackle as well. So you have two new starting spots along the offensive line. And whenever you go out and you sign a guy like Matt Ryan, he's not going to create with his legs. He needs to be able to stand in the pocket, have that protection to be able to produce. And everything around him deteriorated, as well as some of the stuff that he did, to not necessarily make things worse, but he didn't help things as well, at his advanced age. So it was just a tough season all around. Frank Reich, really going back to the move for Carson Wentz was when things really kind of fell off the wagon a little bit. He pushed hard for Carson Wentz over drafting a rookie. I think at that point in time, Chris Ballard and Jim Irsay both wanted to move forward in the draft, get their guy from the future. One name I've heard multiple times come up is they were very enamored with Justin Fields. And obviously, they moved their first rounder for Carson Wentz, and that doesn't work out. So he was, that's kind of the beginning of the end there for the team. They just, you saw the last 2 weeks of the season with Carson Wentz, how they collapsed, and really it just kind of snowballed into last year. And now they're just looking for a full, I won't necessarily say a full reset or rebuild, because I think that involves a lot of tearing down. And I do think they still have some talented roster pieces, but they very clearly need to move forward. The ghost of the Andrew Luck retirement has haunted this franchise now for 5 years. And I think it's now time to move forward. You're picking in the top 5. You never know when you're going to be this high up again. And this is a pretty good quarterback class. You're not going to have that Andrew Luck, Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow type guy, but I think all 4 of these guys can offer different, things as far as what they can bring your franchise. And really just becomes, what flavor quarterback you want. Do you want the dynamic runner and, multiple guy? Do you want the accurate pocket passer who can create? Do you want the guy that does everything well, with Bryce Young, or do you want, the Josh Allen type with the big arm and, can move with Will Levis? All these guys have different things they can offer. So I think this is where Shane Steichen was brought in to help, change things up. Obviously has great development with quarterbacks in his past. Hired Jim Cooter as well, another guy that's worked really well with quarterbacks. So that's what this offseason's about, is just drafting and developing the next franchise quarterback.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I know with, the retirement of Andrew Luck, it really has kind of hit its mark with the Colts franchise, and it has been, a difficult obstacle for them, over the years. And so, going through Jacoby Brissett, going through Carson Wentz, going through Phillip Rivers. So it's like they have not found their replacement for what Andrew Luck was supposed to be. But I've said this, looking at the Colts is, I'm like, okay, we need to have a quarterback in the building. But one of the biggest key concerns that I've had is who's given the supports next to, Michael Pittman. I'm looking at several other receivers to where now I do think one of their youngsters that they've got, I think he's a really interesting piece. I think he really would work with this wide receiver core, but there's got to be somebody else up into this building, whether I find it in free agency or I find it in, in the draft. And it's like, okay, we'll bring the next quarterback in, but I've always had a feeling Michael Pittman just can't do everything on his own. I think it's too pressurizing. We've seen this with some teams. It becomes a pendulum swing. So, in my opinion with this, I think the Colts, they really do want to look for their franchise quarterback. I've said maybe about a couple of reasons. One is now the Bears are open to trading that number 1 overall pick. Maybe that's something the Colts could really grasp and get their hands on and maybe potentially get somebody, I think maybe like a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young. But the quarterback list is so deep that whoever's going to come into this building, Shane's going to build him up. And he's got a great repertoire with being with Jalen Hurts and with Justin Herbert. But, do you think there needs to be a little bit more that has to be addressed on the offensive side? Because I'm all for they got to go and get another wide receiver because I got to give some help for Michael Pittman.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. They drafted Alec Pierce last year, and they really like him. I think he has a chance to be a really good player in this league. Obviously, you have Michael Pittman, and we'll see what happens with the extension talks, likely happening here soon. And outside of those two, you're right. It is a bare cupboard. Paris Campbell, a guy that was drafted in the second round a few years ago, has dealt with injuries, but he's still a really talented player. He was finally able to stay healthy last year, and he's a free agent now. So how do you proceed forward with that? And then outside of that, there's hardly anything. Ashton Doolin, free agent. Then you get into like Mike Strawn. They had Desmond Patman out there for a while. I think he was signed by Buffalo, I believe, off the waivers. So, there's not a lot behind Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce right now. Now they hope those two guys develop, and they both have the talent to be really good players. But you're absolutely right to address that situation. And I think they need to look more towards the veteran route because you can keep drafting and developing guys. And you need to. That's something that is never going to go out of style in this league, especially with the way the game is played today. You need to have multiple options, and you need to have guys waiting in the wing as you develop these guys. But you also need that veteran presence. And this is, it's not a great wide receiver class, but I think there's some really good options there for them. So, I think they likely double dip at that position. I think they address it in the draft. There's a good chance they might try to bring Paris Campbell back. I know they're really high on him. He was able to stay healthy last year. So you could see kind of like a prove-it deal there to get him back in the building. And then they likely sign another veteran as well. So I don't know if you'll see the big splash, DeAndre Hopkins move, but I think they're just trying to build some solid pieces there and hope that Shane Steichen can use those guys to their strength, because that's something that he spoke on, not just the quarterback position, but every position on offense, namely the wide receivers. He mentioned Michael Pittman by name, getting these guys open, scheming them open, getting them chances to get the ball and create. I think, you draft a guy, you sign a veteran, but then you also allow your coach to work with these guys and play to their strengths.
So key injuries we saw last year. I mean, Shaq Leonard, we know, was a big hit on the defense, and we know the defense has to make some adjustments. But I thought, there's a couple of good veteran pieces that really has worked defensively, and we know with Gus Bradley's defense, there's some of it that, I've said to people, there are times where it can be a shutdown defense, and then there may be some where, a play may not have been executed right, and somebody kind of, missed the play call. So, Shaq Leonard, key injury. Another key injury, of course, Quentin Nelson, on the offensive line. We know that because I've always loved what Indianapolis has built on the offensive line perspective, because a lot of these quarterbacks, I've always said this is quarterback heaven if you have a line like this. But we know key injuries were kind of the big issue that happened with the Colts. And we know this year, Bobby Okereke, he is a free agent this year. He may end up, testing the market. So, how do you kind of see things shake up a little on the defensive side of things? Because at some point, Shaq Leonard's just got to be able to give you more games and hopefully, withstand a lot of just these injuries he's suffered now in the last few years.
Yeah, well, that's the hope, and that's that Shaq Leonard gets back to being the player he was before, last year and the injuries happened. So, especially with the contract that he now has, that's it's pretty large for a linebacker. But he's a guy that's not like any other player at that position in this league with the amount of turnovers he creates, the havoc that he wreaks. Getting him back is going to be a huge boost, and he's a player that you need. And then on top of that, the biggest need for me is pass rush because Yannick Ngakoue, probably one of their most productive pass rushers last year, is a free agent now. So, you're under the assumption they would like to bring him back. He's followed Gus Bradley everywhere he's been. He's bounced around a lot. I know he wants to try to find a spot, stick in a spot, but it's all going to come down to money. And outside of that, though, Kwity Paye, who's been named up the last couple of years, former first-round pick, he's played really good when he's on the field, but he does miss a few games every year. Dayo Odengbo showed some flashes last year. But outside of that, what do they really have as far as their edge rushers go? So I think that's a position they really need to kind of key in on as well, because that makes life easier for every other position on that defense whenever your edge rush is able to create. And they did a good job last year.
Yeah.
I believe they had, almost, 40-something sacks. So, yeah, I mean, they were very productive. But really last year it kind of just came down to attrition because the offense couldn't move the ball. The defense is on the field constantly. And whenever you play in the National Football League with the way the rules are, it's so offensive driven. If you're on the field that much, the levee breaks. And that's kind of what we've seen there towards the end of the year, just because they're on the field so much. So I think just having a consistent offense will help the defense out a lot, for sure. But yeah, there's positions they need to address there. I know they really like EJ Speed as well. He's a free agent that they hope to bring back on a good deal. In the linebacker room, they do a great job of drafting and developing linebackers. So, if Okereke does end up walking, which I assume he will, I think you have some options there to replace him. Obviously, Aaron Frank in football last year. He still has 2 years on his contract. So you get Leonard back healthy. You still have Zaire. You get EJ back on a decent deal. And they still have some other guys. JoJo Doman. He's there. They really like him with special teams and what he brought to them in some spots last year. So I'm not necessarily worried about their linebacker core. I think it's a really strong position. And, it's more along the lines of if you're able to re-sign Yannick Ngakoue, go out, draft another pass rusher, maybe get another veteran guy in, because you want to be 8 to 9 guys deep on that defensive line. You want to be able to rotate, keep these guys fresh. So I think there's some work to do there. But overall, I'm really glad Gus Bradley's back. I think they have a really strong foundation there on defense with DeForest Buckner, healthy Shaq Leonard. Obviously, Stephon Gilmore's there still for another year. So I think there's pieces there to work with. The main concern this year is probably going to look on the offensive side of the ball, and that offense is able to help that defense. So,
yeah. And, and it is interesting because I do like, a bunch of like their pass rush names, a lot of guys that really do get after opposing offenses. And even to the time when the ball's in the air, Stephon Gilmore, even when you had Casey Hayward, I mean, there are some, really good potentials from there. Even if it's, getting a mixture of veterans, bringing in some new young guys to be familiarized with the system is one thing they do want to keep to being competitive in their division in the AFC South. So evaluating a lot of the quarterbacks, because we mentioned, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I love with what CJ Stroud has really brought in, because what I've seen in the last couple of years, we know Ohio State football, it's completely different. Like first of all, you're not going to get the same receivers that they've had in college where you had Jackson Smith and Jigba and you had Marvin Harrison. And so there's some challenges. We watched this with Justin Fields in Chicago. So CJ Stroud, the things that I like is I think he's a better second half quarterback than he is of a first half, because there's times where he may make minor mistakes in the first half, kind of feels like he's getting the jitters out. And then by the second half, he's just really good. Like, he's very competitive. So I kind of see a little of that drive in him where he could really move teams this way. I think some organizations kind of would be attracted to that. And then because I look at Will Levis and I look at Anthony Richardson, and the thing about Will Levis is that I think he does have a strong arm. I also do think that there's kind of some question marks with as far as the accuracy. Can he make the short passes look easy? And can he make the harder passes look even easier? I think there's some comps to him on that. But I think if he's in the right scenario where I think he's got to have an offensive coach, he's got to have somebody that's willing to, develop and even adjust his offensive skill set. I think the same thing for Anthony Richardson. Very strong, moves around in the pocket. He showed off a lot in the scouting combine. So evaluating that, who do you think, truthfully, like, if this was the deciding factor, the Colts, I think, really have to go with, who do you, on your mind, think is a comfortable fit that Shane Steichen really can look at and can develop, where they can be tough competitors within their division, even with a rising star in Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this was part of the great thing about the Shane Steichen hire, because he has worked with so many different guys. He's worked with, Jalen Hurts, the mobile guy. He's worked with the statue and Phillip Rivers, that stands in the pocket. And then he's worked with Justin Herbert as well. His rookie year, and he did his rookie year breaking the touchdown record and all. 4,000 yards passing for a rookie. I mean, that's fantastic stuff. So it really just kind of depends on where he wants to go with this. I would say the two guys I would keep my eye on, and when you listen to Chris Ballard talk, you listen to Shane Steichen talk, they constantly preach, accuracy, decision-making, the ability to create outside of structure. To me, that basically just screams CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Now, I do know Chris Ballard is very keen on measurables and, athleticism and how guys look. And, one thing he always describes as being able to feel somebody's presence when they're working out or throwing and stuff. So that kind of makes it a little hairy for Bryce Young, but there are always exceptions. To me, the guy that fits them perfectly is CJ Stroud. I think he has everything they look for. And yeah, he did play with really talented receivers there at Ohio State, but there's a difference between throwing to open guys and throwing guys open. And I think he threw guys open extremely well. And it's just the ball placement he possesses, the accuracy. And when you talk to people around the Ohio State program, you get to really have a sense of who this kid is. And something that always kept coming up whenever I was in discussions with other people was his mind. And they say he basically has almost a photographic memory, his ability to recall things that happen in games and in play, the playbooks and plays, is just uncanny. And so that even kind of alludes to your point there of how great he is in the second half of games, is because once he sees something in a game, he's able to diagnose that, and you're not going to fool him twice. So, yeah. So, I mean, with the accuracy, the decision-making, we saw the ability to create in Georgia and, the Georgia game. So he just fits, to me, everything that they look for. And I think he had a really good showing yesterday at the Combine. All week long, really, you heard about how well all four of these guys did in interviews. The one intriguing name that I am really keeping my eye on, though, is Anthony Richardson. And that's a guy that I think, if you do draft him, if he does go to Indy with Shane Steichen, we saw the work that he was able to do with Jalen Hurts coming out. And I just think if you're able to tap into that talent that he has, he can be a game changer at the position. I mean, we've never seen a quarterback with the athletic testing numbers that he had yesterday. He's one of one. He even beat out Cam Newton, in the RAS score. So he is the third most, I believe, third most athletic player regardless of position. And that's behind Jordan Davis last year at D tackle and Calvin Johnson. So this guy, if you're able to rein in some of the accuracy issues, I really do think the sky's the limit for him. And in a loaded AFC where you've got Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence in the division, Lamar Jackson, I mean, Justin Herbert, you keep going down that list, and it's just –
Oh, did we lose the feed?
Oh, we still going? We got it back?
Yep, we're here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're good. I was just going to say, with you going to –
Oh. Yeah, little technical difficulties, but we're getting it back here, folks. Let's see. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do think there is that part of it where I know CJ Stroud can definitely have the ability, like he's got Justin Herbert comps because he has that ability where he can run out the pocket and really create more space with the offense and really get the wide receivers going, let alone too. I mean, Mo Alley Cox, the tight end, like getting him involved in a lot of different downs where the Colts really do need to produce there in that position. And Anthony Richardson, like, I don't want to be too big on the hype, but I do think it kind of works with Shane Steichen's offense. With, you utilize a little more of the run. People are kind of questioning, we haven't seen him throw more like in college, like and all this other stuff. But I'm like, whoa, timeout. Hold on. We had almost a similar conversation with Lamar Jackson out of Louisville at the time. And so I almost kind of bring up this same similar situation with Anthony Richardson. And I do think he does bring a lot of quality stuff where he's big, he's athletic, he's somebody that could literally scramble out, give you, desperate first downs that the Colts, I think, really needed to improve on in a lot of areas because there were some that had tough times really crossing those boundaries and lines. And there were several different checkdowns. So I do think that Anthony Richardson can be a real good fit in this organization and really kind of bring a lot of his stuff that he showcased here into this division. But overall, looking at it before we let you go, and, we watched Trevor Lawrence really be the number one overall pick this past season. I really have been like, I'm buying into it because he's not a bust. He is somebody that if you give him the right guy as a coach, they will develop them better. And I think Doug Peterson had aced it. We know coming out of a Philadelphia organization, he's won a Super Bowl. He knows what it takes to be, a champion in those regards and really has changed that culture for the Jags. I know the Texans, the Texans are really trying to get almost like an overhaul of players to really make it work to where they can be competitive. And then the Titans, they're sticking with Ryan Tannehill. I'm kind of like, okay, it is what it is. And then letting go of A.J. Brown, who then goes to a Super Bowl, and he's just unbelievable in Philly. So looking at this division, it's kind of weird. It's a little bit wonky, but I would never compare it to like the NFC South because I think that there needs a lot of help. But as far as evaluating with this South division, there's several key things that has to happen in order for the Colts to really kind of shake things up in this division, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you look at it, this is a team that hasn't won the AFC South since 2014. So you're going up on 10 years without a division title. And I know that really bothers an owner because this organization is so used to running this division. They're used to having the Peyton Manning and the Andrew Luck, and now seeing that in Jacksonville, with the Jaguars having Trevor Lawrence, and I kind of throw out his rookie year with Urban Meyer. To me, that wasn't really, last year was his rookie year, to be honest. So I mean, yeah, they've got a lot of work to do. They haven't won the division in 10 years. They only made the playoffs twice in the last few years. Once with Andrew there in 2018, and then they moved to Rivers. And, they were bounced in the divisional round, or not the divisional round. It might have even been the wild card by Buffalo. Yeah, I mean, this is an organization that is so used to success over the last 25 years, and they're now starving for that same success. So that's what this offseason is about. This offseason is not about 2023. This offseason is about 2025 and the next 10 to 15 years of being competitive in the National Football League. So I just kind of want to set expectations that, hey, they know where they're at. And yes, they do still have some talented pieces, but they're not drafting a quarterback in this class with the aspirations of competing 2023. They're looking at the next decade plus of getting back to that level of excellence that this organization has, enjoyed. So, yeah, they have a lot of work to do. Jacksonville is very strong. Let's not forget they get Calvin Ridley back as well next year.
Yep.
So that's another added piece as well. Another year of Trevor Lawrence in the same system there with Doug Peterson's. He's only going to get better. He's already a borderline top 5 quarterback. I wouldn't put him there just yet, but I think another year under his belt, he could be in that same discussion with the Josh Allens and Patrick Mahomes type of guys. And then Houston, they just hired DeMeco Ryans. They're going through a rebuild. They pick before the Colts, and they need a quarterback as well. So if you don't move up to 1, you risk the guy that you want the most getting drafted by Houston, and then he's kicking your ass for the next 10 years. And that's not something they want to see. So,
right.
With Tennessee, it's a little more muddied. Obviously, with the collapse last year, don't really know what direction they're going in as far as Malik Willis, Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry's getting a little older, so we'll kind of see where they go. But yeah, I think right now the Colts clearly have some work to do to catch Jacksonville, to catch Tennessee, even because Tennessee's won that division the last few years outside of last year, and they've had some playoff success. So. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. You are what your record says you are, and they're a 4-win team that hasn't won the division in 10 years.
Yeah, and that's going to be one of the levels of competition that I know that the Colts they really got to get back into, because we know this in the NFL. If you're not winning majority of like your division games or even winning the division itself, it's hard to take you seriously when it comes to the opening path to the playoffs, and so it is a competition that the Colts, I know, would love to take it head on, but we also know there's a lot of different developments, and there's also a lot of key rejuvenation and builds that has to happen with this team to really get them back to where they want to be and be competitive in this division. But there's a lot of good stuff, but I think that there's going to be, I think the Colts will be okay as long as the ship itself continues to stay afloat, and, we really see the development work to the best of their favor. So hopefully we'll see some great stuff with the Colts, but great stuff out of you, Landon. Where can people find you with everything Indianapolis Colts?
Yeah, well, I cover the Colts for the Blue Stable. So that's go ahead and follow them at the Blue Stable. You can follow me at Landon3MR there with 3-Man Rush. I do a podcast as well with my buddies. We discover a bunch of topics. But, yeah, just find me on Twitter. Find me on YouTube with the Blue Stable. Also do some writing with them as well. So you can follow any of my work over there with them.
Also, guys, NFL free agency frenzy. March 15th on a Wednesday. I've got my calendar marked. It's going to be a lot of fun. Lots of big names that are going to get moved, going to different places, maybe some re-signings. And then we've got the draft coming up, as usual, late April. So it'll be interesting to watch. Landon, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will definitely see you soon.
Thanks, Jake. Have a good one.
You too.